Begin this hour with Virginia lawmakers. They were considering a plan to legalize abortion up to birth, but the measure failed to get out of the subcommittee last night, and the delegate leading the fight to save the lives of the unborn says it isn't over. Our Mark Martin is following this story for us and joins us in the CBN newsroom. Mark, tell us about the bill and if it could come up again.
Ephraim, I spoke with Virginia Republican Delegate Todd Gilbert, who is the majority leader and chairman of the subcommittee that killed the bill. He talked about the status of House Bill 2491, which was defeated along party lines 5-3. The bill is known as the Repeal Act and would remove all existing restrictions on abortion in Virginia.
I think the bill in question is done and over with for the session. We will not see it again. What is very telling about this particular bill and the ideas behind it, however, is that the governor of Virginia signaled last week, in fact, very clearly, that he would sign this bill into law if it was placed on his desk. And the only thing keeping that bill from being placed on his desk is our very narrow 51-49 Republican majority in the House and 21-19 Republican majority in the Virginia Senate.
This bill would remove the following.
Virginia Democratic Delegate Kathy Tran, who you see there, proposed the bill this week to allow a woman to have an abortion even while she is in labor and just moments away from giving birth. Gilbert questioned Tran about the bill during the hearing, asking her what exactly her bill would allow.
Where it's obvious that a woman is about to give birth, she has physical signs that she is about to give a birth. Would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion if she was so certified? She's dilating.
Mr. Chairman, that would be a decision that the doctor, the physician, and the woman would
I understand
make
that. I'm asking if your bill allows that.
My bill would allow that, yes.
Gilbert went on to tell me that it's possible that similar bills could be brought up in the Virginia state legislature.
Obviously, this agenda is not going away. The forces behind this agenda are very well funded and very well energized, and they are not going away. And they have taken a foothold in the platform of the Democratic Party, and certainly they continue to drive them to be as extreme as possible on this issue. So we will continue to see bills like this in the future. Whether we are in a position to stop them is certainly up to the voters of Virginia, but I hope they were paying attention to this when it happened.
The bill comes on the heels of a new abortion measure that was signed into law last week in New York. That state's Reproductive Health Act removed restrictions on late-term abortions, again allowing unborn babies to be aborted up until the day of birth. And Ephraim, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo called that measure a giant step forward for women's rights. Lila Rose, founder and president of the pro-life organization Live Action, called the law barbarism.
Monica Klein is a founding partner at Seneca Strategy. She joins us today. Monica, thanks a lot for coming on.
Yeah.
I'm sure you describe yourself as pro-choice. I bet a lot of people watching right now think of themselves as pro-choice. So I'm not attacking you for that. But I wonder what you think of what Dr. Northam, the governor of Virginia, just said, that when a child, he described the child as an infant, is born, there's a point where the mother and the physician can decide whether to kill the infant or not. What do you think of that?
Look, Tucker, I understand that you want to go back to a time where Roe v. Wade was illegal, where women were having back alley abortions, and they were using coat hangers to have abortions, which is actually what's barbaric.
I'm giving you time to make a real argument. I'm not arguing for the repeal of Roe v. Wade. I'm a very straightforward person.
That is what you're essentially saying.
Actually, no, that's not what I'm arguing. And please don't be tiresome. The governor of Virginia, who's a rising star in the Democratic Party, just said this. There's pending legislation that mirrors it, and I'm asking you what you think of it. That's it. I'm not here to debate Roe v. Wade.
I think that right now, reproductive health care is under attack by the Republican Party. 72% of Americans support the right to choose, and yet we have Trump and we have sexual predator Kavanaugh trying to repeal Roe v. Wade and trying to take away our control over our own bodies. This isn't about babies. This isn't about health care. This is about you attempting to control women's bodies.
Okay, please don't be a robot. Monica, you're smarter than that. This is the governor of Virginia just saying this. I just want to know what you think of it. Is that okay? Does that bother you? It's a sincere question. This just happened.
Okay, it bothers me that you are attempting to control women's bodies.
That's what you're doing. You are.
The Republican Party right now is working overtime to repeal Roe v. Wade and to take away choice in every single state.
I wonder if you think you're convincing anybody, or if your unwillingness to address what just happened today on tape that we just played is a sign that you can't defend this. And if you can't defend it, I wonder why that is. Have you paused to ask yourself, as an American, as a person, what do I, as a woman, what do I think of that?
As a woman, what do I think of it? Have you
Yeah.
asked yourself why you spend so much time talking about this rather than thinking about why your party is trying to repeal Roe v. Wade and control women's bodies? Right now, there are 7
hold on.
states where there's only 1 abortion clinic, okay? There are 4
Let me
states with
ask you-
trigger bans where we would, if Roe v.
Okay.
Wade is repealed, women cannot get reproductive health care. This is about a woman's right to choose, and you as a man should not have a single say in that.
Wow. Do you think that you're making a case that most people agree with, that it's okay to abort a child in the 3rd trimester
Tucker,
for
you
no...
can keep trying to put words in my mouth and keep trying to say that the Democratic Party is hurting children.
I have
but
to
your
say,
party is the one that is tearing families
I'm not
apart at
here
the
on
border
behalf
and
of the
allowing children to
Republican
die
Party.
in federal custody. So whose party is actually harming children?
Wow. Let me just ask you one quick question. I mean, this is obviously
ahead,
a pointless
Tucker.
conversation, and I think less of you after, I have to
already
say.
think
but
less of you, so
it's an
don't worry.
honest question. Have you thought about it? Do you have a real answer to what the governor of Virginia said, or are you going to throw yet another talking point at me? I mean, have you actually thought about it? Will you answer that question at all?
I have thought about it, and I am telling
And what do
you
you think?
that your party is attempting to change the conversation about Roe v. Wade and take control over women's
it'd be
bodies. I'm
interesting-
sorry that as a man, what you're focused on is controlling women's bodies, but we will not allow you to do that.
This is a child who's been born. This is not a woman's body. This is an
It just
independent
confuses
person.
me why
that
you
the-
pretend that you have concerns over children when you're completely fine with ICE tearing families apart and children dying in federal custody.
Monica, thank you. I appreciate it.
What does God say about the sanctity of life? God says that he knew the prophet Jeremiah before he was in his mother's womb. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. King Solomon, inspired by the Holy Spirit of God, wrote about the child in a mother's womb. As you do not know what is the way of the wind, or how the bones grow in the womb of her who is with child, so you do not know the works of God, who makes everything. The psalmist, King David, wrote that he was wonderfully made by God in his mother's womb. For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. A baby in the womb has feelings, as we read in Luke 1:44. For indeed, as soon as the voice of your greeting sounded in my ears, the babe leaped in my womb for joy. The baby, who would be known as John the Baptist, experienced the emotion of joy when Mary, being pregnant with the incarnate Jesus, entered Elizabeth's home. There have been over 58 million abortions in America since it was legalized in 1973, and an estimated 1.72 billion abortions worldwide in the last 40 years. God's word has a lot to say about killing the innocent. Proverbs 24:11 and 12. Rescue those who are being taken away to death. Hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. If you say, behold, we did not know this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who keeps watch over your soul know it? And will he not repay man according to his work? Proverbs 6:16 through 19. These 6 things the Lord hates, yes, 7 an abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. There is good news for anyone who has had an abortion, and that is that God offers forgiveness to anyone who confesses their sins, as we read in 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Welcome to the Watchman YouTube channel. This channel is all about world news and Bible prophecy, pointing to the soon return of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Jesus said, as a sign of his coming and the end of the age, there would be an increase in deception, false Christs who will deceive many, wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom, famines, pestilences, earthquakes, Christian persecution, apostasy, false prophets, and lawlessness, causing the love of many to grow cold. Jesus said all of these signs would come like birth pains. Jesus was likening last days events to a woman in labor. As the labor progresses, The pains increase in both frequency and intensity until the baby finally comes. As we get closer to Jesus' return, all the signs he gave us as a sign of his coming and the end of the age will become more frequent and more intense. All of these signs are manifesting around the world in our time.
President Trump says he plans to keep troops in Iraq to monitor Iran. This comes as he also plans to withdraw U.S. forces from Syria and Afghanistan amid talks with Iraqi officials about allowing U.S. troops now stationed in Syria to move to Iraq.
I want to be looking a little bit at Iran because Iran is a real problem.
Whoa, that's news. You're keeping troops in Iraq because you want to be able to strike in Iran?
No, because I want to be able to watch Iran. We have an unbelievable and expensive military base built in Iraq. It's perfectly situated for looking at all over different parts of the troubled Middle East. We're going to keep watching, and we're going to keep seeing. And if there's trouble...
Joining us now, Waleed Phares, Fox News national security analyst. This is a complicated chess game, as always, Waleed. What do you think of the moves the president is talking about making?
These moves are taking place, as you said, John, in a very complicated geopolitical situation. But let's try to simplify it. In Iraq, it makes all sense that the United States will maintain a base, a presence, not just to monitor Iran. Let me add one thing that the president may not have said for political reasons, to deter Iran. So the Iranian regime will know that we are present just next door. And if they want to improve those missiles, as we heard 48 hours ago, they want to improve the long-range missiles, we will be there. But at the same time, we have to be very careful because the Iranians have assets inside Iraq. They have militias, they have people inside government. So we want to make sure that we have allies at the same time, such as the Kurds, the Sunni moderates, the Shia moderates. That's why it is complicated.
The president is getting some pushback specifically on this idea of withdrawing U.S. troops from Syria, not only from his political opponents, but from his political allies, the Republicans, like Senator Ron Johnson. Listen to this.
And I think it'd just be tragic if we bugged out, left the Kurds, who by and large have done the fighting and defeated the ISIS caliphate, the territorial caliphate in ISIS, if we just abandoned them to the mercies, and I use that term loosely, of Russia and Iran and possibly Turkey, it would just be unconscionable. So again, I think Republican senators are sending a very strong signal to the president. We don't want to see that happen, and I hope he is listening.
So if the president does pull the troops from Syria, who fills the vacuum?
That's the greatest idea that we need to discuss, but very quickly. I think there is a misunderstanding and there is a missing link between what the president is stating, that is, we need to leave, and he's right. There's an American majority that wants that to happen, and those in his own party or in Congress who say, but if we leave, we are going to abandon our allies. But what we can do basically is prepare our allies and also get into the scene some regional forces before we leave. So we leave after we organize ourselves and our allies, making sure that they are protected. That should be the U.S. policy that would make more sense inside Syria.
So do you think that by essentially threatening to leave, the president is sort of trying to strong-arm the Saudis and the Egyptians and some of the other nations in the neighborhood to step up and fulfill a defensive role there?
I think regionally that is what is needed. I remind ourselves that back in May of 2017, he went to Riyadh, he met with and spoke to 50 Arab and Muslim leaders. There was a decision made in Riyadh, by the way, which is to form this multinational Arab force that can deploy and help the United States. Unfortunately, 2017, 2018, we didn't do much about it, neither us nor the Arabs. So I think it is time now for the president to speak directly to the leaders of the region and include Jordanians, Egyptians, UAE, Saudis, and others as well, maybe Europeans, to form that multinational force, which will be very useful, not just in terms of defending the population, but also separating between Kurds and Turks and ending ISIS.
The Kurds would be slaughtered, many observers have said, if the United States pulls out. Is that the case? Do you see that happening?
Mathematically speaking, yes. I mean, if the Kurds, as they are right now, are left, and let's suppose next week we will leave, of course there will be 2 or 3 armies that are going to move in. You're going to have the Iranians, the Assad regime, and the Turks at the same time. It will be like Poland divided between all these forces. But if we have a multinational force instead, and if we have a better organized and better disciplined force inside the Kurdish areas with the other minorities, that would be deterrent. And we keep a base in Iraq on top of that to send signals to everybody who want to have an appetite about the Kurds. If we have that architecture, I think no one will dare advancing.
Iran and Iraq are now the closest of allies, but the war taught Iranian leaders important lessons in national security that have influenced policy decisions ever since. The post-revolution government was shaky and caught off guard. 40 years later, military leaders want everyone to know it won't happen again. The anniversary of the Islamic Revolution kicked off with another display of military strength. Unveiled at an arms expo at Tehran's main mosque, the Hoveyzeh is reported to be Iran's latest surface-to-surface cruise missile. Iranian commanders say it has a range of more than 1,300 kilometers and is named after the city famous for resisting Iraqi forces during the war.
We live in a time when certain rulers, who have no regard for the rights of nations, ignore their commitment to treaties and international laws and walk all over them. In such a world, it is wise that we defend our national security by every means possible, despite all pressure of sanctions.
Iranians appear keen to boost public confidence in the military. Civilians here get a rare peek at Iran's arsenal, and enemies a warning to keep their distance. In the 40 years since revolution, Iran has faced ongoing tensions with the United States, Israel, and several Arab neighbors, as well as taking on illegal drug cartels and armed groups on its eastern borders. ISIL and Iranian dissidents have also carried out attacks on Iranian soil, and the ballistic missiles program that Iran says is for self-defense has been widely condemned even by its European allies.
The level of Iran's defence capability has become a stabilising factor in the region. In many sectors, we rank in the top 5 or 10 in the world. And what is important is that all this progress creates stability and security in the region.
Iranian military might help drive ISIL out of Iraq, keep allies in power in Syria, and support Houthi fighters against the Saudi Emirati coalition in Yemen. Key military victories that appear to have taught Iran's leaders the best way to deal with friends and enemies is from a position of strength.
40 ambassadors from the United Nations arrived in Israel this week for a 5-day visit organized by Israeli UN Ambassador Dani Danon. And to begin, the group held meetings with top Israeli officials and took a tour of the cross-border terror tunnels dug from Lebanon by Hezbollah. And while standing by the Lebanese border, the delegation was given a first-hand look at what Israel's Operation Northern Shield was for. But during the meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu in Jerusalem earlier in the day, the premier revealed how Iran was pulling the strings in Lebanon's government.
A great shift has taken place in the Middle East. And that shift is the rise of the aggressive theocracy of Iran that seeks to conquer the Middle East, eliminate Israel, and dominate many other parts of the world.
The Lebanese parliament last Thursday finally ended a 9-month deadlock and formed a new government where Iranian proxy terror group Hezbollah now holds 2 ministries and a Ministry of State. There are also Hezbollah allies in other sections of the government. So Netanyahu explained that, quote, Iran has many branches. One of them is Hezbollah, which has now joined the Lebanese government. Although this is a misleading description, because Hezbollah actually controls the Lebanese government, and this means that Iran controls the Lebanese government, end quote. The Israeli Prime Minister then continued to stress again how Israel is committed to preventing Iranian encroachment on Israel's borders, no matter where from, quote, Lebanon, Syria, or Iran itself, adding that in preventing Iranian aggression, Israel is also, quote, protecting our neighbors and world peace, end quote. In Lebanon, on the other hand, senior Hezbollah leader Sheikh Naim Qassem responded to Netanyahu's allegations by denying that Iran had any control over the organization. He added that Hezbollah only has 3 out of 31 ministries in the new unity government. And then with respect to Israeli military operations, Qassem warned on Lebanese TV that he doesn't think Israel is interested in war, but that if war is launched, quote, we are ready, end quote.
The White House made it official. They've given Russia 6 months. At issue is Russia's development of this 9M729 missile, but these missiles have a range of 480 kilometers, just 10 Ks short of what's described in the INF. That said, was the White House really just looking for an excuse to get out of this 30-year-old deal?
Manila, the INF Treaty served a very important purpose since 1987, for nearly 3 decades, in helping to prevent the production and the deployment of tactical theater nuclear weapons between the United States and the Soviet Union, which doesn't exist anymore. We're in a very different geopolitical environment today. And the Obama administration in 2014 was the first one to actually accuse Russia of violating this agreement. Not much was done except for a lot of diplomatic exchanges of communication, but the Trump administration has been talking the same line as the Obama administration for the last 2 years, but it's this administration that's decided the U.S. is no longer going to unilaterally comply with the agreement while accusing Russia of having unilaterally violated it for the last 5 years.
But now Russia, I mean, we heard in Dan's report there that Russia invited the U.S. to come check out these missiles. I mean, they're technically in compliance, aren't they, if it's 10 Ks short?
This is really for the diplomats to work out. The United States, especially under the State Department and the Arms Control Director, have been making the accusation that Russia is not in compliance. They have presented what they consider to be very verifiable, very credible information accusing Russia of its violations, and the Russians simply dismiss those charges. So I think what's really needed here is a serious formal framework for reviewing what's exactly been done, what has not been done, and not only do you negotiate a new agreement between the United States and Russia, but the Trump administration's complaint now is also that there are countries such as China and Iran that are producing tactical or intermediate range nuclear weapons, and they're under no obligation to minimize or to stop production of those missiles.
I'm glad you brought that up because it certainly is a new world in the last 30 some odd years. China has now become a global superpower. India has their hands on nukes. Iran has nuclear capability. Is that what we need then? Should we scrap this one the way President Trump scrapped NAFTA and just create a whole brand new one? Or do we just walk away from any sort of deal altogether?
My own sense is that technology is moving us in a very different direction than the last 30 years. Russia and China are also now very publicly announcing the deployment of hypersonic glider missiles that operate a very different manner. They don't have a clean trajectory. They arc up into space and come back into the atmosphere. They actually are able to evade anti-missile systems, and they're going to be very disruptive in terms of protecting your strategic assets against strategic nuclear weapons. So we not only have intermediate range weapons that have to be reviewed, but soon you'll also have the potential extension of the START agreement, which is for strategic nuclear weapons. It's set to expire in 2021, and I think the right arms control framework now can help promote an extension of that agreement so that we don't have to renegotiate at the strategic level where missiles are able to be delivered thousands of miles.
Now, between now and then, between the START, before that expires in 2021, between now and then, what about everyone's fears of this opening the doors for a new arms race? I mean, couldn't this put us worse off by 2021?
The Obama administration's position and now the Trump administration's position has been that the arms race has begun with Russia's violation of the INF Treaty. So it's really now a matter of the United States being able to catch up with Russia if Russia continues to violate by being able to produce and to deploy these weapons, or to make it in Russia's interest that both countries pull back from that type of active deployment. But the arms race is already on.
Matthew 24, 6 and 7. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Nation is the Greek word ethnos, which means a race, as of the same habit, i.e. a tribe, especially a foreign, non-Jewish one, Gentiles, usually by implication, pagan. What I believe Jesus is saying here is that there have always been wars and rumors of wars. But when you see the same ethnic group fighting the same ethnic group, now pay attention. His return is near.
Is Venezuela inching closer and closer to out-and-out civil war, or are things not that dramatic just yet?
I would say things are not that dramatic just yet, but we are closer than we were a month ago or 6 months ago. I mean, we know that President Trump has said actually from the beginning, last August, he said that military option is on the table. It's always been. But of course, now the situation on the ground is much more intense, much more fiery, and much more delicate. So it is definitely something that is worrying a lot of people. And if you think about it, Jeff, we heard Donald Trump say this weekend that he was invited by Maduro to talk, and he refused because of the the horrible things that are happening in Venezuela, which is interesting, of course, because we know that Donald Trump has no problem speaking with, let's say, controversial leaders. I mean, he met with Kim Jong-un from North Korea. He's meeting with him again
this month. Yeah.
Exactly. So it doesn't really add up. The storyline doesn't add up. And of course, now with the election of far-right Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, this has really led to a lot of conspiracy theories in Latin American media overall that either the U.S. will invade with troops or they're going to use Colombia or Brazil to get the same goal. I mean, we don't know this. It's important to say, but it is something that is worrying, and it is a narrative that is being presented in the media in Latin America.
At this point, as people begin to, food shortages, medicine shortages, people are struggling to live day to day, does President Maduro still have the security forces on his side? Do we know where the police stand, the army stand? Do they back Maduro in all this, or their allegiance is still unclear for now?
Well, so far they are still backing Maduro, and you have to keep in mind that it's because they have such a long history together, not just Maduro, but also with his predecessor, Chavez. And Chavez ensured that in the top positions in the country, there are high-ranking military men. So they controlled ports and medicine and import and taxes.
And they've been
things that we
successfully putting down riots and protests for years now. They've done this
for years. They know this. So, of course, there are talks. We're hearing from Guaido that some big names within the military are starting to open up to supporting Guaido instead. But so far, the bulk of the military is still supporting Maduro, and so are the courts.
Luke 21:25. And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. One of the many signs we are living in the last days right before the return of Jesus Christ is nations will be in a state of perplexity or uncertainty over what to do in a difficult situation. This is exactly what is happening in our world today.
Well, Venezuela's embattled president is under new pressure after more of America's European allies called for Nicolas Maduro to be replaced. At least 38 countries now support opposition leader Juan Guaido. China and Russia are Maduro's main supporters right now, and this morning Russia's foreign minister called for talks between the government and the opposition. Elizabeth Palmer is in Venezuela, where Roman Catholic leaders are helping Maduro's opponents and others who just want to survive.
Misery and hardship affect almost everybody in this country from end to end. But we decided to go and have a look up close at one little community on the outskirts of Caracas called La Vega. Mass in La Vega not only fills the church, it draws an overflow crowd. Here, Father Alfredo Infante's spiritual message carries a strong political subtext.
Es un mensaje anti-Maduro?
It's not directly anti-Maduro, he tells me. People have to decide for themselves, but the church has called his presidency unconstitutional. His parishioners might call it something else, a disaster. Father Infante takes me deeper into the slum where there's been no running water for 4 months. The church is also behind this sidewalk free lunch program. Potatoes, cheese, and a dose of vitamins. If not for this, some of these kids wouldn't eat at all. With average inflation last year a surreal 80,000%, almost no one in La Vega or anywhere else in Venezuela can survive on what they make from work. The economy here is so broken that, say, the average teacher's salary, $6 a month, would only buy this many eggs. In fact, almost half of Venezuelans would be seriously hungry without some kind of charity or food handout. Meat is a treat. Ask Enrique the butcher, who's still in business, though the customers are fewer and fewer. He's an exception here. He supports Maduro, and he is furious the U.S. has got involved. Every country, he tells me, that the U.S. has so-called helped has ended up with misery and destruction. But that's an opinion you hear less and less, especially as huge quantities of humanitarian aid from the United States approaches Venezuela's borders.
We are currently living in a time Jesus refers to as the birth pains. We are fast approaching a time known as the tribulation, that Jesus says will be the worst time in human history, as we read in Matthew 24:21. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time. No, nor ever shall be. We are currently witnessing events that will continue to become more frequent and more intense until God pours out his final judgments on an unbelieving and unrepentant world. One of the judgments described in the book of Revelation includes the price of food being so high and scarce that it will cost a full day's wages just to barely get enough to eat, as we read in Revelation 6, 5, and 6. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." In this prophecy, it will cost a day's wages just for a loaf of bread. We are not in the tribulation period yet, but we are getting extremely close.
Opening the floodgates of the Ross River Dam in Queensland created what Australia's Weather Bureau called dangerous and high-velocity flows. With the dam at more than 300% capacity, engineers said they had no option. Downstream, homes in the coastal city of Townsville are flooded, and more than 1,000 people have been moved to safety.
We've never seen a year's worth of rain in less than 7 days. You know, that's not exactly what we've planned for, and it really is new parameters that we're moving into.
Northern Australia is tropical and typically experiences heavy monsoon rains, but recent downpours are far in excess of the norm. In some parts of Townsville, saltwater crocodiles displaced by the floodwaters have been spotted, and there's more heavy rain on the way.
This monsoonal trough just doesn't want to seem to move much at all. There's going to be heavy rainfall over the next couple of days. There will also be damaging wind gusts and intense rainfall with significant flash floodings.
Australia's armed forces have been called in to help with what have been described as once-in-a-century floods. Some areas of Queensland are expected to get a year's worth of rain in just a week, and 20,000 homes are at risk of being submerged if the heavy rains continue.
Jesus declares this in Matthew 24, 37 through 39. "But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be." Jesus tells us in verse 37, when our days parallel the days of Noah, he is returning. One of the things that parallel our days with the days of Noah is the unprecedented flooding the world has been experiencing over the last few years. Jesus goes on to tell us in verses 38 and 39 that when he returns, things will be going on as normal, as people will be eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage. Just as in the days of Noah, when people were caught off guard and the flood came, so also will people of our time be caught off guard when Jesus returns. John 15:18 through 20. "If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet because you're not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you."
Bringing the Bible back to the classroom. This year alone, Bible literacy bills being introduced in 6 states, allowing public school students the option to study the Bible's historical significance. North Dakota State Representative Aaron McWilliams is a co-sponsor of one of these bills and joins us now. Thank you so much for being with us. Tell us why you think this bill is so important for our students.
Well, thanks for having me on. This bill is important because it allows us the opportunity to explore areas in history that give a foundation to what we have today. For instance, the very first Constitutional Congress had the very first argument was about whether or not they should start with the prayer. And I think it's important that we look at those things and figure out what are the things that laid the foundations from the Founding Fathers or any other area of history.
Okay, well, you have some people that are against this, some critics. We have the American United for Separation of Church and State. Excuse my voice is a little scratchy. This is their statement. State legislators should not be fooled that these bills are anything more than part of a scheme to impose Christian beliefs on public school children. What's your reaction?
Sure. We've heard those comments. You know, yeah, there's a separation of church and state, but there's not a separation of books from education. You know, back in 1963, we looked at this from a Supreme Court point of view. in the case versus Edward versus Champ in Pennsylvania. And in that Supreme Court case in 1963, the court said that it was okay to do a Bible reading in school as long as from a historical and literary context. In fact, it was even important to education.
Right. I know,
so
John,
as long as we're not teaching the school, as long as we're not teaching faith in the school, we can go for it.
and it's an elective, right? Kids don't have to do this.
Absolutely. No, the schools could choose to offer this elective, and a student could choose to take this elective.
I know that there's a lot of historical significance, and our founding fathers created this country based on Christian values. John Adams referenced Jeremiah 17:9 to support the reasoning behind our separation of powers. He said, this is what it says: to expect self-denial from men when they have a majority in their favor is to disbelieve all history and universal experience. It is to disbelieve revelation and the Word of God, which informs us the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. What are your thoughts?
Amen. I think it's, I think the Bible is, the Bible serves as a foundation of my life, and it serves as the guiding principles to everything that I've done. I think when you look at the Bible on its influence in our history, the system of judges comes from Exodus 18, when you talk about Moses' father-in-law, and he has a hierarchy of judges. The concept of forgiveness, the concept of recompense. These are things that all come from the Bible, and if we don't have a good foundational understanding of this, we're not going to understand how the founding fathers of our country and other countries put it together to have the world that we have today.
1 Corinthians 16:13. Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong.
One day, Jesus is coming. You may be at church. You may be at work. You may be asleep. God grant that you will be ready when he makes his personal appearance. My God, what if his appearance occurs on a Sunday morning? My prophetic word to you this morning is get ready, get ready!
The signs of Jesus' soon return are so strong now, and the evidence is so clear that any person willing to accept the truth can see that the end of the world as we know it is near. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But God demonstrates his own love toward us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. That if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Time is short. Accept Jesus today.